involved. But what we proposed at the Rural Life Center was this project called Food for Thought. If we could develop a dependable alternative local food system that would put more of our food dollars directly into the hands of local farmers, dollars that would then recirculate, according to research, as much as 7 times in the local community before leaving that community, and provide safe, quality food to local residents, we would have a triple win situation that would help at the same time to preserve rural character. Now, we've tried to do this in a variety of ways, which I can only mention here. We started with a guide to local food products called Homegrown, which also educated residents as to the value and reasons for buying locally. We started a farmers market in the historic downtown to try and lure people back from the box stores out on the fringe of town and reactivate and energize the old downtown economic center. We created an Amish produce auction that provides food not only for local residents and businesses, but also is providing it for restaurants and other establishments throughout central Ohio. And we started with Kenyon College to see how we could get a complex institution that does 2,500 meals a day to buy local. That's a complicated affair, but we now are purchasing 35% of all our food. That's about $350,000 a year from local sources, and there's not another college or university in the country that can touch us on that. What is the economic impact of this? A year ago, we conducted a study collaboratively with the Social Responsibility Initiative of Ohio State University's Ag School. And we concluded from that study that if just 10% of the food dollars in Knox County were spent locally, that means when you go grocery shopping, if you'd spend 5 or 6 of your dollars when you go grocery shopping on local products, it would mean $13 million annually in gross sales. It would mean $4 million additional in employee earnings. It would mean an extra $350,000 a year in local sales tax, and it would create 243 jobs. That's quite a little business for a rural community of 50,000 people. But the real money is not in serving Knox County. The real money is in creating a brand that can promote Knox County products in Mansfield and Newark and Columbus and other urban areas across the region. So this has great economic potential, but we're not thinking of this purely in its economic dimension. We're thinking about rural character and rural sustainability holistically, in keeping with our liberal arts roots, as involving preserving the green space that's supported by farming, economic development, as I've said, creating the kind of social relationships that you don't find in Walmart and the big box stores, but you do find at farmers markets, and helping to preserve the cultural values of stewardship, hard work, and community cooperation that are central to rural sustainability. Finally, I want to point out that this is something that has great educational benefit for our students, and students have been absolutely fundamentally involved in every aspect of this project. We now have a special academic initiative called Food for Thought. 10% of our faculty in their courses are teaching about food, farming, and rural life, in religious studies and environmental studies and anthropology and history and Italian throughout the curriculum. Students can complete 3 of these courses and then do a paid summer internship on a local farm, sustainable farm, and get a certificate in ecological agriculture from the Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association, the state organic organization. Students are involved in all sorts of projects, most recently Community Garden Project to help provide local produce to feed the hungry, because a sustainable food system has to feed everybody, not just the middle class. What steps can you take based on our experience? First, look at what your local opportunities are. If you've got a local beef processor, start there. If you have certain faculty here or administrators who are particularly interested in that, start there. Secondly, build collaborations. We started what is now the first local food council to try and reintegrate our food system, to bring farmers and distributors and chefs and academic experts all together, because the farmer doesn't know what happens to his or her food and the chef doesn't know where his or her food comes from. That's one of the failings of our food system. And then third, take an evolutionary approach. You can't do it all at once. You can't start out with a 20-year plan and think you're going to get to there, because each new success that you have opens up new opportunities. And having done this for 10 years, that's been our experience. And remember that this kind of action starts with what's on your dinner plate, because every food choice you make individually affects you very profoundly as an individual and us all as a community. That gives you a little bit of idea of food for thought. Maybe we can treat it more in depth with some questions. Thank you.
Well, I never thought I'd agree with an economist named Howard Sachs, but I do in this case. Okay, so we know an economy is about fundamentally meeting our human needs, right? And a sustainable economy is about meeting our needs without undermining the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. But as our panelists previously pointed out, our economic system is not designed to meet human needs. In fact, we have an economic order that is fundamentally based upon a monetary system that concentrates wealth in the richest and concentrates the wealth of the many. So can we have a sustainable economy that is built on this? I would say that we cannot. I would say that this is based upon a private credit monopoly that is built upon siphoning the wealth of our communities, siphoning our labor and our natural resources, and concentrating it in the hands of the few. And how they do that very cleverly is, of course, convincing us that we need this to live. It's an illusion. We do not need this to live. What do we need to live? We need three things. We need habitats. We need healthy, productive habitats that can support us. We need the skills to be able to obtain a yield from these habitats and to do so without undermining its ability to meet our needs in the future. And we need neighbors. We need friends and people that can work with us, because we can't do it all alone. We cannot take care of ourselves all alone. But we, all of us, participate in a system where we think that this is the only way that we're going to get our food and our health care and our water and everything we need, our housing. And it's not. It's fundamentally a lie. You know, that this is our source of security. We saw the Maslow's hierarchy last night, and we know when this is the source of our security and we don't have it, that causes a lot of stress. There was a study done that asked people how much money they needed, and time after time people said they need 20% more than they currently were making. But then a few years later, when they had 20% more, they said they needed 20% more than that. It keeps going, and I'll explain why. So why is this a problem? Well, 98% of these are created not by the government printing them, but by banks who we've given the power to create money. They're the only ones that can create money, private banks in this community. And it's created by the push of a button on the bank register when they give a loan. Say you get a mortgage loan, a 30-year mortgage loan for $200,000. 30 years later, you've paid back $600,000, $200,000 in principal, $400,000 in interest. Where did that money come from? You obviously, well, you could try to print it in your basement, but that's illegal. I'm not going to condone that. Where does that money come from? The bank doesn't print the money for your interest, for you to pay the interest. It creates a growth imperative. The economy has to grow so you can get a greater income each year so you can pay back all that interest. Well, the economy growing is kind of a problem, because the economy growing is based upon taking our natural resources, turning them into consumer products, and then dumping them in a landfill somewhere. If we had unlimited places we could dump things, and if we had unlimited resources, then maybe that wouldn't be a problem, but we do live on a finite planet. Our atmosphere is filling up with CO2. 97% of the energy sources that we use are going to be in decline by 2030. That's our fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, as well as uranium for nuclear. By 2030, we're going to be using per capita the same that we used in 1930. So what happens to the growth imperative when we have a finite planet and when we cannot continue to grow? Well, it's limited, and so you have people trying to get what they need to survive, what they think they need to survive, in a free-for-all competition. Sounds kind of ugly to me. And of course, and I want to add that the people actually that are worse off in these situations aren't the people on the lowest, because they kind of have some of those skills and they have some of those neighbors' connections for getting what they need. It's going to be the middle class who has a lot to lose and who doesn't have any skills and doesn't have any friend relationships with their neighbor. So say you don't get a loan. Are you not participating in this system? You are, actually. 40% of the cost of goods and services in our economy are going to service a debt, so to pay interest to the bank. So 40 cents of every dollar that you're spending at a store in a town is going to interest, whether it's the store's mortgage or it's their supplier's commercial loan that they got. So 40%, in essence, 40% of the labor that you're doing to get this dollar is going to enrich the wealthiest. How are we going to create a sustainable economy when 40% of people's labor, the labor that we really, really need to start building the sustainable economy, we need 100 million farmers, we need millions and millions of small business entrepreneurs, food processors, and the like, when that labor is going to banks? Well, that's not going to be possible. So what do we need to do? We need an alternative to this. We need money as it should be, which is a unit of exchange, not as a store of wealth. The store of wealth should be in our healthy, productive, natural environments. So we need money that, as was mentioned, just circulates as rapidly as possible within our community and doesn't leave it. 90 cents of every dollar that you spend at a corporate chain leaves your community immediately. That includes a place like Whole Foods. Now, if you spend it at a local store, maybe 60 cents will leave immediately. But the idea is that the more and more local producers you can get, the more and more things that people don't need to bring in outside resources to supply their business, then you can keep all that money circulating locally and causing exchange. So we need currencies that are able to do that. Credit clearing is, I think, an even better idea than paper currency. You can read Thomas Greco. I don't have time to go into that now. State banks is another good idea. North Dakota did it. Basically, the state puts all of their state revenues in a state bank. That bank gives out mortgages. That bank gives commercial loans. The interest goes back to the state, so the state can keep the infrastructure up at the state, so the state can give maybe money back in tax cuts, instead of all this money going to banks. Okay, what can Olney do? Well, as a school, I think it's a responsibility to educate the students on the origins of this monetary system. Students, I think it's, my question for you is to explore this question. What would you do with your life if you didn't need these? If you had your basic needs provided for, what would you do with your life? I guarantee you wouldn't sit on the couch and eat ice cream all day. I think that eventually that you would find something to do that would serve the world in a beneficial way. I think all of us would do that. Okay, and I think that the school can help teach these students, as well as the greater community, the three things that we need: the habitats, how we reforest our land, reclaim land from industrial agriculture, how we create food forests and permaculture gardens, the skills for procuring our food, for cleaning our water, for creating energy, and, of course, the local exchanges and networks for taking care of each other in a community. I think Olney can act as a decentralizing force in contrast to the centralization that is happening, the scary centralization that is happening, that's concentrating our wealth. Right now, 10 seed companies control 2/3 of global seed sales. Olney could start a community seed bank. 80% of beef packing is done by 4 firms. People were talking this morning about Olney doing more to raise beef and local processing, but also of other foods, community kitchens, local food incubators. Corporations are trying to patent all these high-tech solar options and renewable energy systems, while Olney could be kind of a clearinghouse for intermediate technologies, for micro-hydro systems, and doing solar thermal systems using recycled materials. It could be a tool library. And while these mega banks are consolidating wealth and money and power, Olney could act as the kind of community currency clearinghouse, credit exchange, pooling the resources of the community to give out community mortgages, a community bank, local venture funds, and microloans. And I think they can do that, and we don't need this anymore. Thanks.